Well, hello everybody. A little bit of some unfortunate news. We're having issues with the phone and stuff, so we're not taking calls today, just so you know. However, welcome to Let's Talk, normally a call-in show, the Skeptic Haven channel. Let's Talk is a safe space for atheists and those questioning or leaving religion, and anyone that wants to ask questions and have respectful discussions. So let's talk. And today,
this is Skeptic Haven. Let's talk.
All right, as I was rudely cut off there, I just wanted to quickly say that we will be answering your questions in the chat. If you want to pop them into the chat, we'll take a look at them and do our best to answer them as best as we can. What's going on, Arch?
Hey, it's good to be back, Neil. I mean, we've talked before elsewhere, and it's great to be on here, and I am looking forward to talking to you and everybody in the chat. So, yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, hell, not really my channel, but yeah, I seem to be one of the guys they lean on quite a bit to host these shows. How you doing, Mark?
Hey, awesome to be here.
Mark was supposed to be our sound guy, but apparently we can't get the sound shit working. And Wes won't answer his phone calls. And he won't answer. He's like he hates us now or something. He's like abandoned his ship and just left us to try to fumble our way through this. But anyway, we're gonna have a good show tonight. I think tonight's topic is, of course, are you in a cult? And do you know you're in a cult? And how can you tell you're in a cult? I personally am a big fan of the bite model.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And I wish someone had asked me all of the above questions about, I don't know, 20 years ago. That would have really helped with a lot of things. But hey, I mean, I'm here now. And for those who are not familiar, I was raised in the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church and the Institute in Basic Life Principles subcult that was affiliated with that, the IBLP. And if those terms aren't familiar to you, well, maybe you remember the Duggar family of 19 kids and counting. They were also a part of the IBLP, and recently there was about a year ago now, there was a docuseries put out about them called Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Secrets. I was, in fact, in that series talking about IBLP, and now folks are more aware of it. So hopefully if you have ever been affiliated with IBLP, or if you know of someone who's involved in that or any other cult or high control religion, I can offer you insight to that, how to get out, how I got out. And yes, I'm here with two amazing people who are also here to talk about that. So that's great.
Well, let's not get carried away now. I mean, I'm amazing.
No, you're awesome. Mark, you are amazing. And so is Mark.
I'm personally not well versed in the cults, but as a former when I was a Christian, I remember that one of the things that was sort of emphasized, well, I would say it was a big deal, was that there were essentially some religions that we as fundamentalist Christians would consider as cults, and that was anyone that was not a fundamentalist Christian.
Yeah,
right. But now really, and I know there's a bite model and everything, but I essentially look at all churches as a cult. It's just that you've got some that are dangerous and some that don't. Perhaps most are not dangerous, but they're all cults because they're all doing the same BS.
I'm gonna have to chime in a little bit on this. Sorry about that, Arch. I think any cult has the potential to be harmful. It may not be, a huge amount of harm, but I think most cults, or almost every cult, has that potential to harm people one way or another, whether it's emotionally or physically, even, as we know. But for those of you who don't know, before you kick in there, Chad, for those of you who don't know what the BITE model is, it's like an acronym. It stands for behavioral control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. So it spells the word bite. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, and to echo what Mark was saying, yeah, I heard someone say, and I can't remember who, but it was just a brilliant thought, that the difference between a cult and a religion is about 100 years after the death of its founder. So, it's I mean, when you think about it, pretty much every major religion out there started out as a very small cult of personality of some sort, and it's just kind of grown from there. So, I mean, it's absolutely right. And again, in every religion, and especially in high controlling ones and cults and everything, you will see the bite model with all those forms of control, which IBLP certainly, exercised over myself and a lot of my fellow students who were part of their homeschooling program and who attended their seminars and such. And I stand firmly against, any such control. And, as an atheist and a skeptic myself, I, promote critical thinking and skepticism and honestly, following the evidence and, not relying on some weird little man in a bad dye job and a suit that like we had to, tell us what's the truth. Yeah.
I remember dyeing my hair. It
Oh,
should go like jet black with like purple in it and stuff like that. But I think screw that, not anymore. We'll just let it. I'll go gracefully gray, I guess you might say.
I think he used
Now
10W40.
I like to spray W40 or was it WD-40? Is that what it is? Yeah, and it might just to give it that greasy look,
Oh, it didn't look that bad. Oh man.
Jesus Tales asks, are all people capable of critical thinking? I think critical thinking is a learned skill. I think we have a degree of critical thinking, but I think you can become a much better critical thinker if you actually exercise it, and you get much better at it. I used to fall for lots of stuff. I used to believe in all kinds of weird stuff, but getting into the sciences and ultimately becoming a hack chemist, as I call myself, you start to learn that science has much better explanations for things than mythological tales, we'll say, or throwing in some sort of a filler for what we don't know, basically. So, but that takes a little bit more critical thinking than you may already be capable of. So I think critical thought should be taught in school, personally. I think they should teach kids how to do that.
And that was something that was absolutely not encouraged, because a major component of the IBLP that I was raised in was their homeschooling program called the Advanced Training Institute. And what they taught us was just essentially the writings of Bill Gothard, our founder, in these 52, 53 little pamphlets called wisdom booklets that purported to teach every single academic subject we would need to know. They were presented without question, mostly without any kind of citations whatsoever, just very empirical, or just someone once said this and all that, and just left to our trust and everything that what was written was true. And we were told, the very crux of the institute was that we had to be under biblical authority, which included the homeschool program itself. So the idea was that if you relied on authority, you would be successful. But if you questioned or went against your godly authority, you would be unsuccessful. Horrible things would happen to you. Going back to that bite model of behavior control, and especially thought control. Any thoughts, we were taught that any thoughts that went against what we were taught from the Bible cause Satan to have a literal stronghold or castle in your heart. And we had to, quote unquote, tear them down by forgetting our own thoughts and trusting what we were told. And that is an abuse of education. That is actual educational neglect, to tell a child that the only thing they have to do to succeed in life is to follow authority. That's not how life works, and that's definitely not how adulting works. And it took me years. Like you said, critical thinking is a learned skill. I had to unlearn pretty much everything I learned in school to be a functioning adult on my own. And some would say, my definition of functioning adult kind of fluctuates week to week, but that's the kind of long-term effect that such teachings can have. And, unfortunately, that's what cults do to people mentally.
Plus, having a heart, having a castle in your heart would impede upon its what it's supposed to do. So,
exactly, yeah, like it kind of clogs up your arteries. Yeah.
We have some highlighted questions there. So what is this alarming cult in Arkansas, or is it just the IBLP again?
That would,
I don't know anything
that would
about that
impact.
one. So
Yeah, that would in fact be the IBLP. I believe the Arkansas connection is because of the Duggars. So the Duggars are in fact, situated in northwestern Arkansas. But to be perfectly honest, IBLP is an international cult. It operated as a cult in plain sight. I myself am from Alabama, and I still live in the area. And my family got their start in the IBLP here in the Birmingham area. Now, I have friends, and some of whom are in the docuseries, who followed IBLP from Connecticut, from Texas, from Florida, from pretty much anywhere in the U.S., some internationally. IBLP had built training centers in New Zealand, in I believe in Mexico, in Russia, in Romania. Like, they had spread their influence all over the world. And for the homeschooling portion of it, those of us here in the States, we would all congregate in Knoxville, Tennessee, in a basketball stadium every year to kind of, check in with leadership and to hear all the wonderful things Bill Gothard, we thought, had planned for us for the next year or so. So it was a big deal, and it actually reached out and had an influence on what I believe is a lot of Christian nationalism here in the U.S. and very likely abroad today. We had politicians who were bought into the system. Mike Huckabee, very famously,
boy.
was very much involved with Bill Gothard, IBLP, and the Duggars. Of course, he was also from Arkansas. But the headquarters for IBLP historically was in Oak Brook, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. It is now in Big Sandy, Texas, because they've had to move all their stuff as far away from Bill Gothard as possible. Bill Gothard has resigned the IBLP due to allegations of sexual assault by, women who work for him. So they have tried to get far away from him and are trying to rebrand themselves as just this average, everyday Christian resource company, or ministry, as it were. And it's just the same song, different verse. They're still using his teachings.
Yeah. Not surprised to find stuff about sexual abuses and stuff within like cults in general. I think you hear quite a bit about that quite often, so that's not surprising. I think people who end up in leadership positions, of power and stuff like that, tend to let it get to their heads, and they think they can pretty much control anybody and tell them what to do, whatever, stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in fact, there's this one church that it's the controversy is out now. It's Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas, with Pastor Robert Morris. He just a victim came out and basically confessed that the pastor had been sexually assaulting her since age 12, and he did that for 5 years. And now it's all over the news. The pastor resigned, but this is a very famous mega church in the Dallas area. So it's a huge deal. And fortunately, a lot of people may not consider this to be a cult, but here we are. These things are being permitted, like in a cult.
Well, and
just
also,
just real quick, I was just going to say, just because there's lots and lots of people involved doesn't mean it's not a cult.
That lends credence to it too. I think, actually being one, cults tend to be popular, and they tend to draw in as many people as they can to perpetuate its existence. And when it comes to things like allegations of sexual assault and such, the tendency in these cults is to protect the institute over victims.
Right.
And this particular pastor, I've heard so many people online try to defend him, saying, oh, well, he reconciled. It happened a long time ago. He's a different person now, but we have no guarantee of that. And plus, all this had been hidden from so many people for so long. People were not given the information to consent to, him having, in their view, spiritual authority over their own children, over their own families. And this person was not just a pastor in Texas. He was also on a board of overseers for one of the largest megachurches here in the Birmingham, Alabama area as well. He had to resign from that too. So he was involved in a lot of ministries. And it's the same song over and over with a lot of these, hugely popular fundamentalist Christian nationalist, and I would say mainstream evangelical at this point churches, where the first instinct of these people when they hear these allegations are to rally around the leadership and to protect the institute and not say, whoa, wait a minute, there is a victim here. What happened? How can we fix this? How can we keep this from happening again? Look even at the Southern Baptist Convention at this moment. One of the perennial things that they discuss at all of their annual meetings is what to do about abuse in their leadership, in their churches, and each year they come up short with providing anything to protect victims. They had a plan allegedly about 2 years ago that they still have not delivered upon, and it doesn't seem like they're ever going to either.
Honestly, it's not surprising.
Nope.
Like they just say, oh, well, we'll deal with it. And then, of course, like usual, they just shuffle these people around and we don't, they move them to a little city somewhere or a little town somewhere and hide them or whatever. But that I don't really see them really dealing with the problems at all. Want to address a couple of things that are highlighted here. Dr. Time Waster earlier asked, I grew up JW, being told if I read all the Watchtower literature, it was equivalent to a college degree.
Well, that's so funny.
It's not.
They don't want people to go to college. That's crazy.
It's so funny too, because Bill Gothard, even though he is no longer with IBLP, he's now started his own side grift that he himself is producing, where he claims essentially the same thing, that you could start working on a college degree from age 5 by memorizing scripture. And it's all just a bunch of nonsense. These people make huge claims that you're going to be, just so blessed or so gifted from following their lockstep program that, spoilers, they can't even follow. and somehow this is magically going to make you successful in life. And for people who, especially, because cults tend to prey on people who need some kind of direction. My dad was very much one of those people. He grew up in a very rough household, and he was always looking for someone to tell him how life worked, because he became a father at age 19, and that's a tender age, especially when Vietnam was in full swing, to figure out how to adult and how to do so very quickly. So
I'm still working on it too, so I get it.
Right? Oh, and we're all living in as they say, unprecedented times. So it's a whole thing where people are looking for someone to make sense and to provide them an easy to understand narrative, and that's where cult leaders and people who speak confidently about how they have figured out the secret to life, that's how they get so many followers, and people are hungry to believe it.
Yeah. And it's easier for them too if they just have to go listen to somebody who apparently knows it all and knows the secrets to having a good life. Oh, I want to hear this because it'll make it easier for me to do it, because I just have to follow what he's done.
I still don't know.
That's not necessarily a good idea, folks. Our own channel asked, can you tell us a little bit about pamphlets they give out in IBLP?
IBLP did a lot of self-publishing. They had their own publishing studio in their headquarters at Oak Brook, and to this day, they still put out a lot of their own material. The bulk of what they published was their own homeschooling material, the Advanced Training Institute, and their wisdom booklets, which were these like paper stapled together pamphlets. There were 53 of them, and they all covered the Sermon on the Mount, bit by bit, verse by verse, or clumps of verses if they were all dealing with the same thing. And it would go into a deep dive on each segment of the Sermon on the Mount and claim that we could learn pretty much everything we needed to know in life just by studying the Sermon on the Mount, be it law, medicine, linguistics, English, history, you name it.
English.
And so, yeah, they said that we could learn English by studying the Bible and linguistics and stuff. It was just nonsense. But one of my favorite memories was the very first wisdom booklet dealt with the verse in Matthew chapter 5, and seeing the multitudes, he went up into a mountain, meaning Jesus. And so it did a deep dive on that verse to where in their science section, they talked about all the different eye diseases you could have that would keep you from seeing things properly. Like, it was just these long stretches of, just things they would pull out of the verses to make it seem like it was academic. And once you completed all 53 booklets, which originally were planned to be done in a year, eventually they changed the specs on it or whatever to where it could be done over a longer length of time. But once you finished all of them, you would go back and do them again and see what new insights you get from the same old books. And that was expected of you through high school and possibly beyond. So that was their main product. And aside from that, Bill Gothard would come out with these newsletters and pamphlets and books that he would write every year. And of course, some of them were given for free, some of them were for sale, but a lot of them were for sale, to be quite honest. But they were supposed to be supplements to give you all these new insights as to how you could have a more blessed life by following even more rules that he just magically came up with. Everything from how to eat to how to handle your finances. And it was all just a bunch of
What
nonsense.
about how to dress? That's what Cat the Human
Yes,
wants.
100%. There was an entire, as a matter of fact, in the wisdom booklets themselves, they had an entire resource in their, I want to say it was their medicine resource, quote unquote, which was just a segment of the pamphlet dealing with a particular part of the wisdom booklets. And I believe it was the part of the Sermon on the Mount talking about looking at people with lust. They talked about how to dress to avoid drawing people's attention. Now, there were rules for both men and women, but you can imagine who had more rules. There were far more words spilled on the page about women than there were for men. And they talked about wearing things that would draw attention away from your countenance or your face. So anything that had like a low neckline was drawing attention away. Yeah, exactly. Anything with a split in the skirt and everything was drawing attention away from your countenance and was enticing men to lust. It was all placed on the women to dress in a certain particular way to keep them from being keep them from what was termed defrauding men by putting something out there as available that was not available for anyone but their husband. Interestingly enough, though, no matter
so you're saying I have to sew up my skirt now? I can't have the slit in my skirt anymore?
Yeah, right? Yeah. Oh, mine either. No, my kilt, I gotta get rid of the split now. Yeah. But interestingly enough, no matter how close anyone dressed to the hilt and everything, that didn't stop Bill Gothard himself from lusting after the women who worked for him. And it became very apparent that all of these rules were just simply the sort of thing that he found attractive, which is just gross on every level. But he was able to convince people that's what God would have them do. It was a biblical standard.
Yeah. I've often said that if people were to actually to live biblically, they'd be arrested and thrown in jail.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't 100%. Stone your kids to death for talking back to you anymore. And it's just not a thing, right? So you're not allowed to kill that.
And I don't look good in like a robe. That just doesn't that doesn't work for me.
I don't know, man. I think we should toga it up one time.
Maybe so.
Get to some conference somewhere. We'll just fucking march out in togas or something like that.
You heard it here first. The next episode is a toga episode.
As long as you don't go commando under the toga, I think.
How do you know I'm wearing pants right now?
We don't.
I'm listening to a story actually right now that one of the characters does not like to wear pants, so I find that kind of funny. I listen to books at work because as much as I love chemistry, it can get pretty mundane and doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I have to have somebody to sort of distract me in the background, and they don't yell at me for doing it because it's not really bothering anybody because I'm in there by myself. So
who among us hasn't listened to pantsless book characters at work? I mean, they who are without sin cast the first stone on that one.
Right. Okay, here we go. Didn't Bill have certain students that he considered special that were asked to come into his office by themselves? Okay, that's already suspect.
Yes. And my good friend Lindsay Williams, Cult Chronicles on pretty much all the social medias. She was also in Shiny Happy People, and she tells her story about being one of those young women who was brought into Gothard's office after hours, to where they would have praying sessions where he would get very close with her and touch her and all that sort of thing, which was essentially assault. And this was eventually what caused him to have to resign IBLP, because he did this with multiple women, probably more than have publicly come forward, very likely more.
Quick question.
Yes.
Were any of the women that he invited into his room already married?
No, they were
Okay.
all and they ranged in age. My understanding was from like age 13 to age 19. Essentially,
Grow
he
up,
would
yeah.
go to these conferences and he would choose these young women in the seminars that he would teach and all the places he would go teach his stuff to adults. He would choose some of them to come back to headquarters to
Hmm.
receive training and like special
Training.
treatment. Yeah, exactly. And while they were there, he would like counsel them and pray with them, and that led to a lot of um, situations where he was alone with them after hours in his office, and he would do these horrible things. The full measure of the stories are all available on the Recovering Grace website. All the women who sued him publicly and everything, they have put their stories there, and I encourage folks to check them out. And of course, my friend Lindsay has shared her stories, and their stories belong to them, so I leave the details to them. But it was horrific what he did. And also, Ginger Duggar wrote in her book and verified that this was common knowledge among a certain subset of IBLP people, because her and her
Wow.
sisters made jokes about quote unquote Gothard girls that he liked to surround himself with. Young women who looked a particular way, had a particular blonde hairstyle and stuff like that. And they actually
Wow.
made jokes about it while they were still in the cult. So it was one of those things that was common knowledge, but because Bill Gothard was important, no one dared question him, because that would be questioning authority.
Right, for sure. Yeah. And yeah, for fear of bad things happening to you, you just, I guess, didn't say anything, which is horrifying. But yeah, he's did just like Jesus Tale said in the chat, just like the priests in Daniel 13. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think any sort of thing like this that's ever to become known, these people should be shut down right away. They should be shut down, arrested, thrown in the jail, like throw the key away. We don't need people like that, the predators like that in society.
I agree. But, unfortunately, the wheels of justice turn slow, and
Yeah.
there were a lot of situations around the lawsuit against Bill Gothard that, quite frankly, would take about 2 hours to go into in depth. So, just to summarize, Bill Gothard and his followers caused such hardship for the women who came forward and everything, that they ended up, for their own safety and their own just their own mental health, if nothing else, withdrawing the lawsuit. And even though he resigned from IBLP, he still claims to be vindicated by the withdrawal of the lawsuit itself. That being said, they are coming out with a documentary themselves, the women who were involved in the lawsuit, called Until the Truth, which will be coming out soon, is my understanding, where they will be sharing their side of the story in full. And I support them in that. And I support them in, sharing their story with the world and letting them know once and for all, what Bill Gothard is, no matter, what has happened legally. And my understanding too is that ever since the docuseries, more people have come out about their stories, and there's other legal things that I'm not even privy to all the details
great.
of, where IBLP and Bill Gothard are finally being held accountable. And I support that as well.
Absolutely. Anyone that's got tales to tell about that should be stepping forward. What do you take on all this, Mark?
I mean, I just think it's horrible. It's horrible that our system somehow still allows for this sort of treatment of people, innocent people, to continue to go on. Yeah, it's sad.
Well, and this is, to me, especially, here in the US and Canada and elsewhere, there is this idea that anything religious is on some level inherently trusted or inherently good. And IBLP existed in plain sight in front of the rest of the evangelical world, and no one questioned it at the time. The Duggars on 19 Kids and Counting, we were talking before the show, people would watch it and they would kind of treat it as a curiosity, but never think to ask, hey, wait, what's actually going on here? Why are the kids all acting in this weird robotic way? What's happening behind the scenes? Who is this weird person that they keep referencing that they follow? And and people don't really ask the questions to look into it. And I'm hoping that through Shiny Happy People and some of the other documentaries that have come out about cults and about high controlling religions throughout the past year or two, I hope that this causes people to look more critically at these things that just don't look right, whether or not they are religious. And frankly, if they are religious in some intent, that should be even more of an alarm that, hey, something is definitely up,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We have someone new in the chat, Erica Perez. Welcome to the show. Grew up Pentecostal and knows this world too. From TikTok, not the church.
Indeed.
Welcome, Erica. You're always welcome here. Yeah, and I'm always looking for people to interview, so I had to get that in there real quick.
I was just going to say that my 2 cents on this conversation could be if the fact that the Bible has such a skewed perspective on women, namely that the book itself teaches that the woman's sexuality is a property of the father until marriage, and then that gets passed on to the husband, and then from that point forward until the person dies, the husband owns the reproductive organs of every female. That so long as that's still part of this book, this manual, quote unquote, that no wonder these things are going to continue happening, because men just have the very this biblical perspective on women is hurting men and women. It's bad.
It poisoned everything, and this was something that Gothard was adamant about. He taught that women were under the authority of the oldest man in the house. If they were unmarried, or if they were married, they were subject to their husbands. Like you said, this was a non-negotiable in IBLP, and we've seen the tragic implications of that with Josh Duggar and the abuses that he committed, and the loyalty of his wife to stick by him all this time. She needs to be out of that relationship for her own health and that of her children, but the cult will not allow that, and because she is so steeped in it, and she is in a way trapped, even though she does have the freedom to leave. In theory, everything she has ever known tells her that she is under that authority. And authority was something that was never negotiable in IBLP. And it was the very crux of everything that we were taught. And it hit the women the hardest. I talk about my experiences, but I always want to make very clear that my experiences do not overshadow who it was designed to hurt most. And that was the women in IBLP. Their stories always take precedence in my view. I gladly share my stories, and I agree that the poison hurt everyone, the women and men, but it was designed especially to hurt women. And as it turns out, especially in the case with Bill Gothard, that design succeeded all too well, and it never should have.
I'm under the impression that, under the thought anyways, that most religious based organizations or cults, if you will, are all patriarchal. And most of the rules are there to support patriarch, and not so much the women itself. They tend to have a lot of harsher rules for women in many of these things. And I also want to just really quickly address a comment that I read earlier from Jesus Tales, where freedom of religion, what can the government do? It's a good question. I'm all for freedom of religion. Believe what you want to believe, right? Worship how you want to worship, whatever you want to do, as long as you're not hurting others with it. And that's the thing, as long as you're not harming others. When this stuff starts to get into the realm of harming people, like abuse, sexual abuse, even worse than that, torture in some cases, then that's when the government can say, oh, hold on, you're free to practice your religion, but I really don't think your religion requires this. And if it does, then we're going to cancel that fucking religion because it shouldn't be existing.
And also, I feel like this is something that's really been bothering me ever since Shiny Happy People came out. The response that I've gotten from the religious community has been odd because they're almost universally, the people I talk to, with very few exceptions, they say that what happened with the Duggars is horrible, that IBLP is a terrible organization, it is definitely a cult. But they are more concerned about the fact that I'm atheist than the fact that they still exist. I remember sitting with a group of women once at the farmers market here. Well, yeah, they were, yeah, exactly. They were, they had seen the docuseries, they recognized me, and when I told them that I was an atheist, they immediately started trying to bring me back in because they were all, part of the same church.
Concern for your soul.
Yeah, they were concerned for my soul, so they started witnessing to me, and of course, it was all the same arguments I've heard before. I started knocking them down. I said, look, bottom line, I've been there, heard that, and I've said many of the same words you have when I was still in. I said, I wouldn't worry so much about myself. If you saw the docuseries, you know what I went through, and it's still happening. All this happened in your house. I said, as Christians, if you are concerned about me, go fix the problem. Go police your own. Let people know in your congregations that this behavior is not acceptable. Call the authorities when you see children abused. Stop this abuse. Get places like this shut down. And one of them said, well, we're not really so much church-focused people as we are Jesus-focused people. And I said, and that's convenient, isn't it? Because that puts it all out of your responsibility in your view, but somehow I'm still your problem. I said, I'm not your enemy, but these people who are hurting children should be. Yeah. So I routinely call upon the religious community. If you believe that these things should not be tolerated and these institutions should be shut down, do it. You are better equipped to do it than I am, but I'm going to still keep doing what I'm doing.
D. Murphy put in the chat, I was abused, beaten, and, well, the R word by my husband, and was told I had to stay.
Horrible.
See, that, to me, is like harm, big time. And D, I'm so sorry that happened to you. But you're free from it now. And when I see you in BajaCon, I'll give you a great big hug. Not that that'll help, but it might a little bit.
God, I wish I were going there. That sounds like an amazing time. And also, sorry, that should have never happened.
No. The fact that they told her that she had to stay and keep accepting that as being somehow okay is the worst part of it. Like, they should have said, oh, D, really? Well, we'll talk to your husband. We'll get you out of there for the time being. Maybe we can resolve this somehow. But no. The whole men are the head of the household bullshit had to remain in play, right? At least according to them, which is absolutely horrifying.
About protecting the institution.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that reminds me of that verse from, I think it's Ephesians. The wives submit to your husbands. Like, what is it? Like the Lord submitted to? Oh, submit to their husbands in everything.
Yes.
And then he uses the metaphor as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives submit. And that means full submission. There's no holding back. And that it's just horrible, horrible teaching. It's ammunition for killers. It's just terrible.
Yeah, it's ammunition for anybody that wants to be a complete douche canoe.
Right.
This is something I saw over and over too. Like, just from speaking from the side of, growing up male in this world, there was a particular kind of person, a particular kind of man who would thrive in the cult, who would get, special privileges, who would be seen as leadership, who would be seen as gifted and special. And 9 out of 10, it was usually being an asshole to be perfectly honest. Like the people who understood the benefits, quote unquote, that the patriarchy would give them as someone who was born male in IBLP, and and the willingness to take full advantage of it, those were the people who thrived. And that was wrong, because it poisoned them as people. And it also told, I was one of the ones who never really felt like, that was me, because the idea that I was supposed to be, the leader of a household and the commander of my family and stuff like that, that sounded like a lot of work. And frankly, I was a lazy kid. But I was told that my
Commander of my
unwillingness
family sounds like a video game.
right? But I was told that my unwillingness to do so meant that I was spiritually unfit to be a man. And so, the definitions.
What does that mean?
Exactly. Yeah. I remember I was part of this junior paramilitary section of IBLP called the Alert Program. They called it Alert Cadet. 3 days of mock boot camp for me as a 12-year-old. I turned 12 during this little excursion they did. And
Right.
I failed at every single physical task I was given because that wasn't my thing. I was a nerd. I played on my Commodore all day. I enjoyed being the indoorsy type. But I was told by my dad on my birthday that the reason I was failing all these physical challenges wasn't because I hadn't practiced or I was uncoordinated. It was because I wasn't spiritual enough to be the male leader that was needed in our cult. And that is damaging to a child, a 12-year-old child who already is awkward enough. You're going to tell them that all this is expected of them. Also, one other thing, Bill Gothard taught that teenagerhood was a myth and you were expected to be an adult at age 12 or 13.
Holy shit. Wow.
Ridiculous.
I want to address after Mark. I think Mark has something to say, and I'll address what I'm going to address afterwards.
Yeah, you read my mind. I was going to mention Karen Butcher said that passage was not the word of Jesus. What Jesus said versus what people developed are two different things. Yeah, sure, it was not Jesus' words, but it's Paul, right? And then and not only that that's there, but the thing is, like, what usually happens is book authors, people that write extensively about how to make apply these biblical principles, in the marriage, for instance. All they need to do to establish this, this fact that men are above women and therefore they ought to submit, is cite the passage. All they need to do is put Ephesians 5:22, right? Put it on parentheses, and you're being biblical. That's all you need. So no one's gonna question, oh, that was just Paul. People are gonna, yeah, that comes from the Bible. It must be true. Therefore, do it. So whether Jesus said it or not, it's irrelevant.
Right. Sorry about the dog barking. I live in a community area, and there's lots of them around here. I wanted to address Erica Perez's question about what do you think is the best way to support others as they leave religion and lose their whole community. And as you two know, that's what my show is all about. Erica, what we do on my show is we chat with folks about how they found their way free from their previous beliefs, and then we get together with a bunch of other people in the community so that my guests know that there are many of us out here who've got your back. And there is another great resource called Recovering from Religion that you can contact. And I can get you that information if you'd like. You can email me at 604atheist@gmail.com. And I can get you that information, or you can just look up Recovering from Religion as well. Just Google it. I'm good friends with those guys. There it is right there. And they have many, many ways to help you as well. They're well-trained people. They're great people. I know many of them. And they will help support you as well. And you haven't lost your whole community, because there's many of us here that would consider you be part of the family. So you've got us you can fall back on. And I can be reached anytime, by the way. I'm usually pretty good at answering my emails too. So usually. Yeah, I hope that helps a little bit. Okay. Well, anyone have anything else they want to talk about this whole cult stuff? I have a question. Let's say you're walking down the street and you see some people and they're on the side and they've got some sort of culty looking stuff that they're gonna, let's say, like for example Scientology, where they want you to try the little tricky little meter thingy that they got there.
Mhm.
How do you address people that are clearly trying to woo you into some kind of a religious belief or cultish belief? How do you address those people so that you don't have to, be rude? Although I would be anyways, but that's just me. Like, how do you address these folks to say, listen, I'm really not interested, because you know how pushy they can be. Like, at least I do. I've had to deal with this many times. And I pretty much either just lay them out if they don't leave me alone. No, I'm kidding. I don't do that. I don't condone violence, people. It's not very good. Violence begets more violence. But anyway, so what would you guys say about that? Like, how would you address something like that? Or if you're approached by people?
I mean, with me personally, if I'm in a place where I know that activity is going on, like there's a market I attend every week that has a huge JW presence out in front of it, I'll usually wear one of my atheist shirts, and I never get approached at that point because it's like, oh, well, yeah, it might be catching, But coming at it from the perspective, because I used to go around knocking on doors, sharing the gospel and witnessing to people and doing the whole Ray Comfort, you think you consider yourself to be a good person thing, and I was damn good at banana. It, I'm ashamed to say, right? But I understand too that the people who are in that position, I am thoroughly convinced that is less about them getting converts as it is keeping those people who are putting that out there in line. Because putting them out there publicly to deal with rejection, and especially to deal with like people who are rude to them and stuff like that, reinforces the idea that it's safe in our cult. You see what the world thinks of you, right? Because every time I would knock on a door and it would get slammed in my face, or people would cuss me out or threaten to get a gun or a dog or something, I would just be like, well, I'm being persecuted for the Lord. Hallelujah. And it would reinforce the idea that I was safer in my church, because you see what the world is like out there. And, for me personally, like I've had, like Mormons knock on my door and stuff like that. And, I'll offer them, I'm like, hey, do you want me to call your parents or something? Would you like a drink of water and stuff like that? I really don't want what you have, but, hey, is there something I can do for you to make your day a little bit easier? And I'm not saying that, this is always the right thing to do every single time. If someone will not leave you alone, will not enforce your boundaries, absolutely, get in their face and just be like, screw off, hi YouTube. But, So yeah, there's a time and a place for each of those things, but I feel like it's all down to the individual. And I will say this: the cognitive dissonance that you put in their head, that a secular person who is godless, who allegedly has no morals, can be a good person, that will work on them in the long term far more than any intellectual argument you can give them, because they've been trained. They've been taken down a whole road of how to respond to every single thing. They have rote responses for everything. And even if you trip them up, they will change the subject to go to whatever script they have pre-planned. They're ready for you. But if you show them, one of the things that really worked on me more than anything else was being out in the workforce and forced to work with people who I thought were inherently evil, but turns out that they, were some of the best people I could work with, and were kind to me, and, had a shared goal of success in us doing our work together. So, things like that. That's how I see it. But yeah, that's just my perspective.
Corey Ostrowski says no one is good. I think one thing I'll add, like, whether you do or don't entertain missionaries, or, people that knock on your door or whatever, would be to just don't take whatever printed materials they have to offer you, because some of these organizations will actually make the people that are out there trying to preach the word and whatnot actually pay for these pamphlets themselves. And it's crazy, because I see it in some sense. It looks like it's almost part of the business of the church organization is to sell them these items, kind of like I don't know, maybe Mary Kay still does that, or Amway, where they
Church
make you
pyramid
buy the stuff you're selling.
Yeah,
It's kind of like that, they are their customers, and so don't take their printed materials, because that's just bad, and they're going to end up in the trash anyway. So,
and also, like, don't be kind to the point where you're putting yourself in that position where you're at risk. That's never a good idea. No.
When we get knocks on the door, I just crank up the Slayer or Cannibal Corpse or something, walk downstairs in a towel, go, I was just about to have a bath. You guys want to join me?
Yeah.
Usually got it. No, we'll come back. No, you won't.
Yeah. This is a story of mine. I've told this many times in my Spanish channel, but I once had a couple that would come to my door. I think they were Jehovah's Witnesses. They kept on insisting, and at the time I was actually an evangelical. I was a seminary student, and at some point I was waiting for the right moment. They were said, "Oh yeah, it's because they were showing me things in the Bible. In the Greek text, it says this and that." And I was like, "Oh, the Greek text. Let me pull that off the shelf." And I was like, "Okay, where does it say that? In what verse?" And then at that point, they realized, "Oh man, I think we better go, because he seems to know a lot about the Greek
text. Knows more than we do."
Yeah. So
it's going off script. Abort.
Yeah, that was the last time we saw them. So that was
shocker. Yeah, they didn't come back to our place either after that little incident. So,
and honestly, like, I feel like too, all those methods of dealing with them too are very valid. Like, anything that that you feel comfortable doing and protecting them and protecting yourself and everything. Yeah, I don't think there's one particular way that's right to do so. Like, there's several ways you can go with
it. Corey Ostrowski says Jesus saves, not the church. He uses Geico.
Jesus saves. Gretzky with a rebound. Score. Okay.
Oh, speaking of which, the Stanley Cup Finals tonight.
Right.
Oilers versus Panthers. I can't believe it. Sorry, a little sports talk, but I couldn't believe Panthers had them down 3-0 in the series, and the Oilers have come back 3 games to force a Game 7. Like, what? And they beat them like 8-1, 5-1. Like, Panthers are like, okay, what's going on? And I think tonight the Oilers are going to take it, honestly. Keep Stanley Cup in Canada. No, I don't give a shit. Most of the players are Canadian anyways. All around.
Oh, but Florida deserves it. Actually, they don't. Yeah, Edmonton can have this one.
Anyway. Bye, D. Good to see you.
Yeah. I don't know anything about the Stanley Cup. I'm a soccer fan, so right now I've got my eyes and heart at the Copa America.
Right.
Which is, by the way, being played in the U.S. And so, spoiler alert, nice. The U.S. won their first game. So, congrats.
Very good. Good for the U.S.
Yeah, they beat the Bolivians.
Canada even made it in. No, hockey's tonight, D. The game is tonight at 5 o'clock. So, it's already started.
Does Jesus save in soccer too, or does that?
Oh, yeah.
Well, just the comment Jesus saves would have to be demonstrated to be factual anyway. So, Jesus saves what? What does he say? Why do we need saving? The whole thing's a con job. So, if you ask
Jesus
me,
saves like $100 a paycheck. Just kind of stows it for a rainy day. Actually, back in the day, he used to save 10% of my income. That sucked. I want that back, please.
There's so many things that are wrong with it. Like, first of all, you can't have free will and God's plan. That contradicts each other. You can't be all loving and just. That's a contradiction. You can't be all knowing and still know that everyone eventually is going to do things like the Holocaust and stuff like that. Like, why would you bother if you knew all that stuff ahead of time? So it's a scam. It's mythology, and it's a useful tool to control people. Captain Humanist says or asks, do you think Christian nationalism, use your mouth, Neil, uses the same tactics as cults do to draw in their people? I think they are a cult. So I would say that's exactly the same.
Oh, yeah.
I think everything, especially speaking in the U.S., that you see going on right now in the current Christian nationalist push I think all of that has been building up in the world that I grew up in for a long time, like at least since the 70s and 80s into the 90s, because I remember hearing most of what you hear in Christian nationalist circles today all the way back then. And back then, it was treated as fringe nonsense by a large part of society. Now, a large part of society is making it the mainstream platform of the right wing, and I feel like that they have played the long game. It's been a long, slow draw in of political power. And so the tactics
started with Reagan, I
have
think.
infiltrated. Exactly. Yes, 100%. And I would argue like the fledglings of it have been even before that, all the way back to, say, Jerry Falwell and beyond.
What's his now? Bob Smith, there's something interesting there. Jesus said, this temple won't stand, not for future. Herod's temple went down in 70 AD. You mean 70 CE? Jesus gave it back to God. God saved. Oh, God gave Jesus a new name we haven't known for 1,953 years. God only after 70 AD till now. I have no idea what any of that means.
What's that new name?
A lot of numbers.
New name. Oh, the new name? Oh, Fred. It's Fred. Fred, buddy.
I think maybe Bob should learn. I don't know if he does, but the Gospels were written after 70 AD when after the temple had already been destroyed. So they're just they're being tricksy with you.
Satan was destroyed.
Yeah.
Why create your own enemy to begin with? Like I don't get that whole thing, anyways.
Yeah, I'm gonna predict the Twin Towers are gonna be destroyed by a couple of planes that are gonna crash into it. And then
it's funny.
And then pretend that I'm writing like in the 80s or something. But I'm really writing it now. This is what they did.
It's also funny too. People talk about like all these predictions from like Nostradamus and everything. When you really sit down and read them, it's essentially just some guy going like, "Hey, in the next 100 years, there's going to be a war." Yeah, that's a really good prediction. Like that's you're pretty much dead on with that. The more general the prediction, the more likely it is to come true. Pretty sure,
yes,
something will happen tomorrow. I'm a prophet.
Yeah, especially when it had already taken place twice. The temple had already, one time had already been destroyed. So
I predict, that I will have to wake up to go to work.
I predict someone will win the Stanley Cup.
Yes, tonight someone will win the Stanley Cup. An interesting question that was highlighted here. Did you or no? Or was it highlighted? I don't think it was. Hang on. Where'd it go? Dang it. Oh, Dr. Time Waster, what critical thinking skills do you think is taught to learn to prevent one from falling into another cult after leaving one? That's a good one, because technically that's what I did when I first left Judaism. I got interested into the Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, and that kind of led me into the whole foray of the occult, like Wicca and Druidism and Buddhism and all sorts of other things that I rambled through for a while and considered myself to be some kind of a pagan or whatever. So I think personally, I think critical thinking is just that. It's critical thinking. And I think that learn to question. If something seems like it's a little too good to be true, then question it. Dig into it. Question it. Don't let your own personal biases play into that questioning either. Like, question from a neutral standpoint. Like, what can I find out about this? And you're going to come up with all these different answers, because there's going to be some wooey type answers, and there's going to be some actual technical scientific type answers. You'll know the difference between the two. The wooey stuff is going to give you stuff that sounds sciencey, and it isn't going to give you anything cited. So you're going to say, okay, well, that I don't really see any citations for what they're saying. So I'm going to go over to this other avenue that I found and look deeper into that, because that seems to have citations, and usually they will.
I would say too, just realize that, stay humble. Realize that anyone can be bamboozled into something. Even now, as someone who tries to practice critical thinking in everything and skepticism, sometimes I will still be taken in by something I read online. I'm like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And come to find out, a little bit later, oh, wait, that wasn't true. Well, my bad, stuff like that. Like, it happens. We're human. I heard someone once say that, cons don't fool us because we're stupid. They fool us because we're human. And people who trick people are very well studied in how to exploit these little shortcuts we've made in our brains to do so. Be gentle with yourself, but also, like you said, exercise your critical thinking. And like we said at the start of the show, learn the bite model. When you start to see, whatever you're getting into or whatever you're starting to be told, start to limit your behavior, your emotions, your thought life, and everything, the information you take in. Really start to put those flags up to say, hey, wait a minute, let's back up. Who benefits from me doing this?
I'm thinking Bob Smith here is a believer. You're wasting your breath, Bob. None of us here care, Bob, if that's your real name. Yes, your prediction is correct. And then Doorknob Head said, I predict tons of Lego. And he's correct. I'm a Lego fanatic, so.
I also think that
Lego.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I also think that what keeps people going back to church or perhaps trying out different denominations or different religions even, it's because they themselves are caught up in this cognitive dissonance where they're actually looking for, they're going to say that they're looking for the right church or religion, but they're actually looking for the religion that agrees with what they're already thinking and believing.
Yeah.
So you almost have to get yourself out of the way first and perhaps question, how do I know that what I know is true? And then, look for the evidence. Let the evidence speak for itself. Don't give too much credit to personal experiences or, that kind of evidence. It's not what we're looking for here. If you're trying to find for like the truth, sometimes you need to be a little more demanding, more have a higher bar of epistemology.
Yeah, don't let yourself be convinced until there's verifiable evidence to support it. Yeah, I think that's a good way to bring this to a close. I'm pretty sure we got the hour. We usually go an hour. I don't know. Can we go longer? I don't know.
My evening is clear.
I'm good if you're good, or I'm good either way.
Slowly growing.
Fun. I'm enjoying this,
collection. I have something similar to Pokemon cards I can show you. And yes, I still play.
Okay.
There are Yu-Gi-Oh cards.
Nice.
Oh wow.
So, yeah. Yeah. If I showed you all these cards, you'd be like, "Oh, I know what deck he plays."
You want to keep it a secret, huh?
Oh, I don't care. I play Lightsworn. Although they're now viable again in today's meta. So because of some new cards that came out, they're now viable in today's meta. But they've been sort of not a thing for a long time. But I kept playing them anyways because it's my favorite deck to play. So
as long as you're having fun.
That's right. That's what I'm doing, having fun. I do use some cards that aren't Lightsworn, but they do help, like Fortune Lady cards. So
nice.
Nice.
She's a good one. Her effect is very, very good. Start nuking everything. Not with real nukes, folks. It's just a kid's game. And I'm a giant child. Anyway. Bob Smith say potato. Potato. Tomato. What do you guys think? What's the most bizarre cult you can think of? I can think of a couple myself, but I got to go back a few years, and I experienced through my lifetime. Not that I was in personally or personally experienced, but I remember them being in the news and stuff like that, like the Hell's Gate or Heaven's Gate. Is that what they call it? Mm-hmm. Heaven's Gate, Hell's Gate. Who wants to be in that one?
I have a few friends who might be tempted.
We have a place here called Hell's Gate. It's a giant gondola that goes over a rapid river or something.
What is
And also,
Canada?
I think Jonestown, another one,
Oh yeah, that's
which
true.
was absolutely bonkers. Kool-Aid, anyone?
Yeah, my a few friends of mine, Sharon and Tracy, they were part of a cult, and I cannot remember the name of it, but it was started by Keith Greene, who was a Christian rocker who died in an airplane crash, and that pretty much disbanded the cult. But it was kind of like a commune type, end of days type thing, which exploited folks for their labor, much like IBLP did. And it's just you see the patterns over and over in every cult. Everybody exists, and people are forced to work and spend their time for free to benefit the people at the top. There are many reasons why cult leaders do what they do, but ultimately someone gets exploited. And it's like Jonestown was all built to the ego of Jim Jones. And
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
he finally just completely just went off it and everything. Everyone had to be unalived, and that was, it's just, people look at that over and over and they say, how could this happen? And then take the wrong lessons away, and more cults spring up.
Bye,
Not
Bree.
really.
Titan, or as I like to call him, Teton Uranus. Titan Uranus says, the Weasel Cult. I have no idea what the Weasel Cult is. I've never even heard of it.
Wasn't that the one around the mulberry bush?
Yeah, that's right. Where the monkey was chasing him, right? Something like that. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, How to Rule an Asteroid. Hi, How to Rule an Asteroid. That's the motorcycle club talking about Hell's Gate. No, I think that's Hell's Angels you're thinking of. One of their chapters just got shut down around here too.
I personally was invited to a church called the International Church of Christ, but this is in the Spanish world. It's a church that originated in Colombia.
Really international then?
Yeah, they were really international for sure. They had franchises all over the place, and it was very cultish. And I picked up on it very quickly because they were doing some very bizarre things. Like, for example, the main leader, who's a woman, she was the one and only person that had the authority to compose and sing all the worship music of the church. So there's no worship music allowed from anything unless it came from her. And that was weird because at the franchise locations or whatnot, they would just play a video. So it was just weird. But the craziest thing is that at the end of the service, they would ask, this is something they did every weekend, they would ask the newcomers to stay for a word of prophecy. And this is where they really got you. And I remember experiencing someone that would, so you're like sitting there and they ask you to close your eyes in a moment of like prayer and whatnot. And then someone would come behind you and tap your shoulder and then start saying things to you. And this was supposed to be, well, they claimed that it was the Holy Spirit that was being channeled through these people, these prayer warriors and whatnot. And then they would start saying things to you. And it was all basically cold calling, like the kind of technique. Like if you're getting a reading from a medium, it was that very same type of stuff that it would just give you. Things that are vague enough that could apply to anybody. Like, oh, I see in your future that you're going to be signing some very important papers that are going to change your life. And so the whole thing is like, here's proof that the Holy Spirit is working through this church, which makes it true and only true because everyone else is not. And so therefore, this is where you need to be. So crazy stuff. Experience that in a Christian church.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
I found out there. So the Weasel Cult is Dr. Tapioca Weasel's cult, where we worship Maya Atkinson, the fallen goddess. Maya's good people. So is Dr. Tapioca Weasel. Mm-hmm. And Jesus Tales asks, is it okay to call MAGA a cult? Abso-fucking-lutely it's okay to call MAGA a cult. They definitely fall under the bite model.
Oh yeah, and Trump is very much their messiah. Like that's
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
Jesus, but then we've got another guy.
Now it's Trump first, then
Oh.
Jesus, right? So,
Oh yeah, that's right.
Have you
I
all
mean,
heard that song that was going around TikTok? I'm standing with the chosen one, and the chosen one, of course, being Trump. It's a
yes,
country
I've
song
heard
that
it.
someone's like you listen to it and you're just like, this is uncomfortable. I've heard this before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah, it's creepy is what it is. Yeah, so Cat's heard it too.
What a
Yeah.
dollar store kind of messiah that is. I'm sorry, it's just wow.
Oh, it's brutal. And look what ever since he took the power and was in the White House, he's given all the crazy ass evangelicals, white supremacists, he's given them all license to act like assholes again. Usually they were always in the background. We never really, we knew they were there. They weren't really being rambunctious. They were just kind of promoting their own shit to their own people in the background, and now they're everywhere, and it's freaking people out, and they're harping on, marginalized groups and stuff like that. And I think it's horrifying what's happened down there, and it's taken the whole political system and just thrown it upside down. It's like crazy down there right now. You guys are down there, and sorry about that. But
it's
lots of
just
room
so
in Canada.
indicative too of what we were talking about earlier. Like, you're allowed at certain points, depending on how important you are to the institution, to just completely blow aside any of the rules of the institution itself. Like, Trump has done things that would never fly in modern evangelicalism, and still to this day continues to revel in it. Matter of fact, he has even said that he's never really asked forgiveness for sins, which in pretty much every Christian denomination I've known, that's a prerequisite to being a Christian, to acknowledge and confess your sins. So
Yeah.
stuff like that gets put aside because he's useful. Bill Gothard, everyone turned a blind eye to his things because he was useful. It just shows that power and the institute itself is always at the forefront in these systems. Like, no matter who gets hurt in the process, no matter how many victims there are, the person who they perceive is most important is allowed to do anything. That right there is a dead giveaway that you're in something terrible if you're in it.
Yep, for sure. Yeah, I feel kind of bad. I hope that things ultimately get back on track at some point, and these people are penned up again into their own little world, and they can stay there. Because I don't want to deal with that shit. It's bleeding into my country too. Just so you guys know, we've got that Pierre Poilievre whack job that's trying to be our new conservative leader, and he's he's like Trump Jr. in some aspects. So, let's just hope not that. I mean, I hate politics personally, and I hate politicians, and it's not like I'm best friends with Justin Trudeau, because he's done some pretty shitty things too, but for the most part he's done a lot of really good things. So but Poilievre would just dismantle all of the good things that he's done, because he's a dick. But anyway,
all I can say
enough
from this end is sorry,
eh? Yeah, maybe she could console you with a little bit of poutine and maple syrup.
Poutine.
Poutine is great, man. If you've had
go for some poutine
real
right now.
McCoy poutine. Yeah, closest I got is some hash browns and cottage cheese. That's about, I don't even have any gravy here.
We used to have a hot dog place near me that served what was called the O Canadog, and it was a hot dog with poutine and fries on top. Oh,
no,
God, it was so good.
Sounds good.
So good.
Yeah. I was at IKEA today, and we all know they have hot dogs for $1. I didn't have one. I usually do, but my mom wanted frozen yogurt, so I got her frozen yogurt, which she can, dripped all over my car. But I have cleaning supplies, so it's okay. It's Mom, you can drip all over my car anytime you want. Like, she doesn't even know how to use a computer, so she'll never see this.
That's later yogurt.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, fellas, here we go. George Spencer, as politically outspoken as these churches are today, they should be taxed. I agree. They're basically a political group now. 100% agree. 100% with that. Right. if you see like a good example of something like that is the mega churches, like with like Osteen or something like that, where the guy's got a freaking Lamborghini, for crying out loud. Like, really, all the money, we should be taxing you if that's what you're going to do with that money. It's supposed to be going into what you guys support, into the church itself, into the organizations that you support, stuff like that, for the help the people that come to your services. That's what it's supposed to be for. It's not for a freaking Lamborghini, you douche canoe. So why are you buying that kind of? That's twice I used that word today.
Well, and also, like, one of the biggest funders of IBLP here in the States was Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby gave IBLP basically all the property stateside that they owned, just gave it to them as a gift.
Yeah.
And that's an example of a corporation essentially buying off a religious organization. The same corporation that argued that as a corporate body, they were Christian because apparently Jesus died for cheaply made Chinese knockoff goods, and somehow that made them exempt from having to provide health care for their workers because they thought it was abortion somehow. It's it's just so screwed up, because even with the entities we do tax, there are all these different little loopholes that benefits the church and these ministries, and at this point it's become a farce of saying that these are community driven nonprofit organizations when they're literally just making a killing off of these lobbyists, these corporations, and what have you. It's just at this point it's almost comical to say that it's any kind of fair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then something else that's part of that whole system that's terrible is that how some ministry organizations, like the so-called ministry organizations, like the Ark Encounter, for instance, the theme park, where while the theme park itself might be structured as a nonprofit, the transportation to the park and the parking business isn't, and it's owned privately by the same people that are running the thing, and that's how they're making so much money on the side as well. So it's not just the church itself reaping from these benefits, but also private individuals that are part of the leeches of the same system that are making lots of money as a result of this thing.
Well, fellas, I'm an early riser. I start work at 5 a.m. So I got to start getting myself prepped for work tomorrow, like basically make lunch and stuff like that. So with that being said, first and foremost, I want to thank both Tons of Mice and Doorknob Head for their super chats that they had tonight. Hang on here. All right. So as you can see written right down there, we are looking for volunteers for producing, booking, and call screening. If you're interested, please contact us at West D. Sturdivant, just look how it's spelled right down there, at gmail.com. And also thanks to our patrons, Puck, Helen, Greene, Logan Fisher, Amanda McLeod, Eric Ozols, Rion, Deneen Murphy, Dan D, Michael Wiseman, Sunny Shell, Aaron Coalson, and Phil Calderone. Don't forget to check out our other shows on Skeptic Haven. Tuesdays is Secular Soapbox, Thursdays The Sunny Spot, Saturdays Global Atheists, and Women Atheists Unload, and Let's Talk, this fine show, on Sundays. Unfortunately, tonight, guys, we couldn't get the phones going, so we promise that next week they should be back up and working. So, yeah. I guess that's about it. So thanks to all you guys hanging out with us in the chat too, and thanks for all your questions tonight. You helped us get through this night of malfunctions. So and Doorknob's words of advice today before we shut the show off: leeches get steeches.
So true.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice.
Thank y'all.
This is Skeptic Haven. Let's talk.